Welcome back to another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas, really excited to kick off tonight's show here Wednesday at 8 live. Love being live. So, of course, as you guys, trickle in here, feel free to post a comment in the comment section below, giving me your take on the Buffalo Bills and what you think of their Super Bowl chances this upcoming season. But first, I want to let you guys know that this show is sponsored by 26shirts.com. 26shirts.com, if you've never heard of it, you're living under a rock. But if you haven't, because you're living under a rock, jokes aside, 26 Shirts is one of the best one-stop shops for all things Buffalo. Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo Bandits, Buffalo Bisons, or just simply Buffalo. Go to 26shirts.com and you will find an item more likely than not that will catch your attention and meet your Buffalo apparel needs for the 2024-2025 Bills and or Sabres season. So this is the first time that I've also been on this podcast in quite some time where I'm not wearing a Buffalo anything. Wearing a Fenway Park t-shirt. Shout out to my Boston Red Sox who were able to get the series win against the Houston Astros. Huge series for them this late in the season as it is August 21st. Really happy that the Red Sox were able to pull that off. So today's subject matter is extremely important for Buffalo Bills fans as this news is somewhat old news now, but it's news nonetheless that really does matter to me, and it matters specifically, number one, because of the player that we'll be discussing today, as well as number two, what it means to the Bills and losing this player, and number three, simply who will replace him. And that is, once again, Matt Milano. Matt Milano is out indefinitely, and as reports trickled in about this, the Bills' all-pro linebacker suffered a torn bicep in practice, and it was an injury that the Bills' coaching staff feared the worst, and they ultimately, unfortunately, were right that Matt Milano tore his bicep. It's a devastating injury. It's a gruesome injury, and it's one that takes a long time to recover from. And the situation with Matt Milano, to me, is this. The Bills' investment in Matt Milano, I don't even know if you could call it that, because Matt Milano was a mid-round selection linebacker at a Boston college that not many mid-round linebackers turn out to be, these all-pro caliber type players where they end up making the Pro Bowl year after year, regarded as one of the best of his position for the vast majority of his career, if not all of it. Matt Milano is one of the best, outside linebackers, maybe the best outside linebacker in the game. You could make that argument. I sure would. And I have over the years, based on where he was picked, based on size, perceived skill or lack thereof to be what he became. It's been one of the greatest success stories in this era of Bills football, the McDermott, Brandon Beane era, and alongside Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, obviously Trey White, who is now also gone, and on to the LA Rams. To me, this is just another sign that times are changing at One Bills Drive. Unfortunately, as I say that, I know that, a lot of Bills fans are feeling like, I'm wrong to throw, any more bad sand or vibes to the Milano, circumstance. But I like to approach things just from a realistic perspective when it comes to the game, when it comes to injuries, when it comes to players that have suffered multiple injuries over the years. And with Matt Milano, it's as simple as this. It's just the simple fact that Matt Milano is suffering, 2 back-to-back seasons of devastating injuries, and yet he's on the wrong side of 30. And I say that as a 32-year-old man, but I'm not playing in the National Football League. Matt Milano is. So only he knows his own body better than anybody. But the injuries that Matt Milano has suffered are ones that are devastating, are ones that take a long period of time to come back from. And in this game that the NFL, kind of acronym is National Football League, right? Abbreviation is National Football League, but to many, it's not for long. It usually does not last long for particular positions, for running backs, for linebackers, for corners. Really, the only position that has been able to have sustainable success over a long period of time in the NFL, especially in the last 20 years, is the quarterback position, due to guys like Brady, due to guys like Aaron Rodgers, and a few others. So when I look at the linebacker position in this game right now in this league, there's been some really solid ones, but they have not played long. They have not had Ray Lewis type careers. Guys like, let's just say, Patrick Willis, guys like Chris Borland, who were coming off of rookie of the year type seasons and decide, you know what, this game is a violent game. I don't need to do this for 10, 15 years, bash my head in, and those are all different circumstances. But at the end of the day, the principle, the talking point is the same, that the linebacker position is a brutal position, and it's supposed to be played brutally to the game of football, no matter how much Roger Goodell and the NFL Players Association, that the powers that be within the National Football League, the 32 NFL owners, no matter how much they try to make this game safer, the positions that are in physical, demand to be physical are still the same. And those injuries persist. When one injury happens, another one happens, the player gets older, he just continues to get hurt. And that's what I fear we're seeing now in this, back nine, golf pun intended, of Matt Milano's career. And Matt's not playing 18 years. He's not playing 18 holes. He's playing probably 10 or 11. And Matt Milano has been in this league for a number of years now. He's a seasoned pro. He's a 30-year-old NFL linebacker that has almost 500 tackles to his name. So it's a very tough pill to swallow for this defense because of the caliber of player that Matt Milano is. But at the same time, understanding that Matt missed the majority of last season after being injured in week 5 against Jacksonville in London due to a fractured leg. Fractures his leg in 2023, tears his bicep in 2024. There's a pattern here that the older this guy gets, the more he's going to get hurt. And that's a pattern that I hate to acknowledge, but of course, it's just the reality of the game. And if anyone disagrees with me, there was a name that I mentioned in terms of players that get hurt as they get older at positions that demand certain things physically in comparison to others. Tre'Davious White, Trey White, he was a all-pro corner guy that could fly with the best of them, cover with the best of them, hang with the best of them, and did so from his rookie year. I remember one of his first rookie kind of runs in his rookie year. They played Cincinnati, they played Atlanta, they played the Saints. They were playing the upper echelon receivers in those matchups. They're playing A.J. Green, they're playing Julio Jones, they're playing Michael Thomas. All those guys were the cream of the crop at the wide receiver position 2017. And Trey White, stood toe-to-toe with those guys. To take a boxing reference, he went snap for snap, step for step with those guys and held them to pretty modest numbers, just like Matt Milano did. Just like Matt Milano was one of the best linebackers to the opposing running back. Just like Matt Milano was one of the best coverage linebackers in the game. He's not covering these tight ends anymore because he can't withstand the physicality of the position. And the same concept, happened with Trey White over a period of time. One ACL injury, an Achilles injury, and now he's in LA on a 1-year deal. He goes from being one of the highest paid corners in the game by Buffalo to being just another 1-year prove it type corner with the Rams. And that's just the economics of the NFL. That's just what happens when a player gets hurt and he's out 2 straight years essentially. Now, with Buffalo, and Matt Milano, I put to the tagline, what does this all mean? And to me, it means that Matt Milano's got 1 year left on his contract with Buffalo. Beyond that, I think that Brandon Beane would be kind of playing himself if he thought that Matt Milano should be extended beyond next season based on the injuries that he has suffered. And as I look at it, what player is going to really step up? What player is really going to show what he's capable of? Well, we've already experienced this. We saw Matt Milano out last season. We know which players are going to take his spot if, in fact, the chips fall where I think they will. And Dorian Williams is a highly capable player in the mold of a Milano, a mid-round pick that can run sideline to sideline, that can find the ball carrier. Whoever's got the ball, Dorian Williams is usually around it. But is he Matt Milano? Of course not. And he's not going to be a peak version of Matt Milano until he's got more years in the league, because that's what it took Matt Milano to get to where he eventually got to. So this is a very tough, loss for the Bills defense. And it's a defense that, we always talk about the offense and Josh Allen and, Diggs when Diggs was here, and Keon Coleman, now that Keon is here, and Dalton Kincaid and James Cook, and such an offensive league now. And that's usually where a fan's mind goes, because we're so fixated on fantasy numbers, fantasy football, offense, points, PPR, all that stuff, yards per catch, all that stuff. And I think it gets lost on the kind of newer fan base that defense, there's that saying, defense wins championships. That's a saying for a reason. And I think that there is no season that has kind of exemplified that more in recent years, I should say, than the Kansas City Chiefs of the 23-24 season. I've talked about it a lot over this offseason that I really feel like KC won the Super Bowl, let alone got to the Super Bowl, this past season, largely because their defense was just on another level. And they had 8, young starters out of 11 on that side of the ball that were massive contributors. George Karlaftis, of course, Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie, phenomenal players. Whereas Buffalo, they're shifting their entire roster, but they're really shifting their defense into a younger group. Cole Bishop at safety. Obviously, Rasul Douglas at corner. He's been in the league a few years, but Kyer Elam, expecting more out of him. Christian Benford, another year of him. Greg Rousseau, expecting him to take that next step. But guys like Dwayne Carter and a few others that fall in that, Dorian Williams as well, that fall in this new Bills defense that I think the Bills are going to desperately need to rise to the occasion and to show up just as much, if not more, than their offense. Because if Buffalo's defense is weak in any way, shape, or form, then you can count on the fact that Buffalo's offense will be forced to play in these like shootout type games that make for exciting games for the average fan. But for Buffalo Bills fans, it's safe to say that they'll be frustrated if every week is a shootout, right? Especially when we have the schedule that we have. So make no mistake about it. Is this a loss? Yes, it is. But the Bills are accustomed to being without this player because they were just without him for basically the entire year. They're going to be without him again for basically the entire year. And at what point does Brandon Beane stop falling into these patterns of holding on to players for too long, re-signing players for too much money on their second contract? And I love Brandon Beane. I think he's done a phenomenal job. But in the cases of Trey White, in the cases of Matt Milano, hindsight always 2020, mind you, that these contracts were just not beneficial to the Bills getting better in 23-24. I mean, the Bills, I think, did as much as they could possibly do this offseason. And I want to say that again, they've done as much as they could possibly do. That doesn't mean that they're going to be the best version of themselves, but given their situation, they've done as best as they could possibly do because of the fact that the salary cap is what it is. It always will be what it always will be. It'll go up year to year as the NFL continues to make more revenue and make more money, but teams spend more. The more that they have, the more that they spend. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I think that the Bills kind of put themselves in a position to definitely spend in 2025, in 2026, not necessarily in 2024. So if this team suffers more injuries along the way, you can bet on the fact that that will drastically impact the Bills this year, this season, more than just about any other in recent memory. And last year, the team went through a lot of injuries by season's end. They were battered and beaten, worn out mentally and physically. I think these last 2 years with the DeMar Hamlin situation, injuries, the year after, a lot of guys got hurt. They brought back A.J. Klein, for crying out loud, right? Terrell Bernard out, Matt Milano out, Trey White out. So Poyer, playing with a bad shoulder, essentially a bad arm, So these are things that I think mostly now that they've moved on from Poyer, thought they could have done that a little sooner, to be quite honest with you. I thought they could have moved on from Trey White a lot sooner, to be honest with you. Evidently they didn't, and they felt like they couldn't, or they tried to in certain ways and couldn't make it happen due to the money that they were being paid. But to my point, that the money that they were being paid was not necessarily good contracts. But outside of, that's a hindsight 2020, and I get that. But outside of that, that's what leads the Bills to the scenario that they're in right now, where they can't quite spend the money that they want to because that money is being spent on other players or was spent on other players. And that's a really tough pill for the Bills Mafia to swallow, but it's one that is a valid take in the sense that looking at the team now, people wonder, why didn't they draft? Why didn't they trade? Why didn't they do that? Well, they really didn't have a lot of options with the salary cap at the number that it's at. And I think 2025, if in fact Matt Milano's contract could be reworked, maybe they move on from him even next season rather than continue to carry him. And I know that as it stands right now, his contract is $17 million in dead cap. So that's a lot of money. But I think that there's reason to believe that this was the beginning of the end for Matt Milano in Buffalo. And I know not a lot of people want to hear that. I understand just as well that he's a fan favorite. But at the same time, business is business. And at the end of the day, this is a business. A lot of people fall in line with that thought, and some people kind of fall in love with the players that are here for a long time. I'm one of those guys. I loved Kyle Williams. I love Fred Jackson. But at the end of the day, there's a beginning, middle, and an end to a player's career, and eventually that time will come for Josh Allen as well. Hopefully not too soon. So that's my take on the Bills losing Matt Milano and what it really means, at least to me. Sound off in the comments section below. I greatly appreciate all of those that tuned in tonight on the Buffalo fan base Twitter, as well as my Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. Of course, you can find more of my articles, written work at ryanthomas.take.substack.com. Go on there, read some of my articles, show your support. I greatly appreciate it. I'll be putting together more 2024 fantasy football stuff. I do have a magazine coming out in the next couple days, and that will be behind the paywall on substack.com. So for $9.99, you'll be able to get all my rankings, not just for your pre-draft, but my rankings during the season based on matchups. So it's a one-stop shop for all your fantasy football needs to help you win your league, as I have done quite a few times in my time playing fantasy, which dates back. It's been 20 years since I started playing fantasy football. I was 12 when I first started playing. So crazy. Actually, 22, I think. 22, no, maybe 20. But nonetheless, it's been a bit. So with that being said, I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'll see you guys at the Reinvention Brewing Rager for the 27 Buffalo Fandemonium event. Really looking forward to that out in Canandaigua. See you there, and I'll also see you next Wednesday for the next edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Last and certainly not least, go Bills.